Why do you think there's such a battle between estate agents and solicitors?
Let the cat out of the bag, Rhys. Sometimes it's about having skin in the game.
Yes.
Some lawyers have it, some don't. I think it's disappointing, Rhys.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that we're all working towards the same goal. They were terrible. They gave me, sleepless nights. It was awful. So I don't care whether you're the cleaner or a partner. If you don't have the right attitude, you're not joining my team. Simple as that.
So, my name is Rhys Henry, luxury real estate agent covering South East London and Kent. I'm here today with
William Michael, partner at Taylor Rose Solicitors.
For people that don't know who you are and what you guys do you want to let people know more about what you guys actually do as solicitors? What's your role?
Absolutely. So I'm one of the partners at Taylor Rose Solicitors. We are a property firm that specialise in residential, commercial and really all aspects of property law. Mm-hmm. We're in fact the second largest property firm in the whole country, something we're really proud of. But we're also a top 60 law firm. So if you imagine that there are just under 10,000 law firms in England and Wales, we're in the top 60 in terms of revenue that we generate. So we're a fully serviced law firm.
What is conveyancing for people that don't know what it is? I mean, for me as an estate agent, and I know what the role entails, but for people that don't know, what is conveyancing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Rhys. So conveyancing is quite simply the property process from start to finish when you are buying or selling a property.
What made you actually get into the residential side? Because obviously there's the option of commercial and other elements you can get into. But what made you choose residential over some of the other options?
Really good question. So to take us back a few steps. So when I was at uni and sort of deciding what to do, as most people in that position, you don't know what is out there for you, you don't know what the options are. Right. And the great thing about law is that it maps out the next sort of 6, 7, 8 years of your life. So I had an interest in law, not a massive interest, but again, when you have that degree of uncertainty, it's nice to pick a path that will map out the next chapter of your life. So definitely. Law was good in that regard. It meant that I could do a 3-year law degree, a 1-year postgraduate course, and then find a training contract. And that was my route into law. Okay. In terms of residential property, it was really pure luck. Yeah. If truth be told, I actually failed residential property at university level, as well as in my postgraduate course. Okay. And I just, by chance, ended up in residential property as a paralegal. But as they say, studying something and doing it in practice are two completely different things. True. So once I started doing conveyancing or assisting a property lawyer, I found that I really enjoyed it. And I've actually got a unique background. So I worked for a number of estate agents during my studies, and that gave me some really good context and empathy in terms of what you guys go through. Okay. Fair
enough. I feel like there needs to be more empathy in general between estate agents and solicitors. In fact, which leads me nicely on to my next question, which is why do you think there's such a battle between estate agents and solicitors? Because you reached out to me through social media. We've been working on a few projects together. We've got a few completions done, and we like to work in harmony. So I'll throw you the business, and we'll get the transactions done, and we'll do it as a team. But why do you think there's such a war?
It's a good question. It's almost like cats and dogs. Historically, estate agents and lawyers, and I think it's disappointing, Rhys. The reality is that we're all working towards the same goal. But I say that given the fact that I do have empathy, given that I've worked in estate agencies. So I've seen firsthand where lawyers can be short, rude to estate agents. I've had that myself when I had my estate agent hat on. So what it gave me was empathy and an insight into what you guys do. And the reality is that for most property lawyers, unless they've bought or sold before. They really, truly don't understand the process and the process from your perspective, because the reality is that your process doesn't start from when you get to start corresponding with the lawyer. Your process starts much well before that, when you're fighting for the business for a vendor to instruct you. You've then fought off some of your competitors. You've then carried out countless viewings on the properties where some applicants don't turn up, some mess you around. You've then got the offer, you've then negotiated the offer, and at that point you package the deal. And it's that point that most conveyancers get involved. So without that empathy, without understanding what you've been through, Rhys, it's difficult for a lawyer to understand your perspective, so to speak. So just going back to your question, I think the reason why there's been that battle is really due to a lack of empathy, and also coupled with that, the lack of a commercial awareness. And what I mean by that is, some lawyers are commercially aware and some others. For me personally, I look at estate agents from the perspective of, if anyone in the process can help me get to the point of exchange, that's a winner in my book.
Definitely.
That is an advantage, and that's one that I will utilise, because I'm commercially driven. I want to get paid. Not all lawyers think with that same mindset. Not all lawyers are geared up contractually to think with that mindset. Some lawyers are going to get paid whether the deal goes through or not. Some lawyers are on a fixed salary. There's no incentive for them to push their deals through any quicker. So that's a little bit of context from our perspective. You have lawyers on different types of contractual agreements. Some are employees, some are self-employed. And sometimes it's about having skin in the game. Some lawyers have it, some don't.
Fair. Great answer. Very great answer. I actually went out into the public not too long ago, it was about a week ago, and I wanted to find out whether the public thought it was normal for transactions to take as long as they do sometimes, because I'm sure you're aware some transactions take 8 months, sometimes a year, sometimes longer. And the feedback, or the general feedback I got from everyone, is that they think the process should be a lot quicker for buyers to move into properties, sellers to move out of their properties. Is there a reason why you think it takes longer? Is there anything that aids to your job being easier? Or is there anything that a buyer or a seller could do to help you coast things through smoother?
That's a 2-hour question in itself. The reality, there's so much that can be done. I mean, there are so many facets to that question and that answer. One is what we touched upon: how commercially driven are the lawyers? So, for example, if you've got a commercially driven lawyer acting for the seller, but you've got one acting for the buyer who isn't commercially driven, who has no incentive financially to get the transaction through, may not even be qualified or a specialist in their field, that can be, or those can be factors in slowing down the transaction. The parties to the transaction, of course, the seller and buyer. The seller may be very proactive, but the buyer may be lax. Again, I think this is where empathy and my insight into your profession is useful from my perspective. So progressing a transaction, I think, is important. I think estate agents who sales progress are the ones that get their transactions through quicker. I look at sales progress as an invaluable tool. Whether you're doing it yourself or you're passing on that responsibility onto a colleague, I think it's important.
100%.
Sometimes that can be the difference in an exchange happening in 8 weeks or 12 weeks. But also the party setting realistic expectations right from the beginning. So if you're a seller who wants to complete within a certain period, make that clear to your estate agent, make that clear to your solicitor, and ensure that your solicitor communicates with the other party.
Amazing. It's really good insight. I've witnessed this several times over, where the buyer doesn't communicate well, seller doesn't communicate well, and this is where there's miscommunication that happens, and everyone's working to different types of time frames. And I think it's really important that it's clear, like you said from the offset, when people want to move in, when the transaction's looking to be done, so everyone kind of knows what time frame they're kind of working with. I think that's what I would say definitely sets you guys apart from a lot of the solicitors that I've worked with in the past, because you guys go that extra mile. I definitely feel. I feel like that's why you guys stand out. For those who don't know, I've been working with yourself for the last, I think, 4 to 5 months or so now, coming up, and I would deem you guys as part of my team, because this job is difficult as it is by myself, hence why I thought, expanding my team and working with yourselves was probably the best move I've made this year for definite, and this is why I always advise my sellers and my buyers to use yourself as my kind of in-house team. Can you talk to me more about Isabella? Because obviously she's part of your team. Yeah. What I found, I was taken aback, and I was actually I was wowed by the fact that I didn't realise that she doesn't actually operate from the UK. She operates from Portugal. So
you let the cat out the bag, Rhys.
How is she able to still progress sales so quickly from another country?
Okay. It's good question. So to answer that specific question, the great thing about Portugal is it's on the same time zone as the UK.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about someone in the team having to start their day earlier or later. We're on the same time zone.
Okay.
But more importantly, it's all about trust.
Yes.
For me, one skill that I can't teach is having a good attitude. It's the one component that is unteachable. So when I'm recruiting, when I'm looking for someone to join the team, attitude is the number one thing that I look for. If you've got a good attitude, everything else is can be developed, whether it's your experience, whether it's your skill set. Isabella I've known for a number of years. She's my right-hand person, very proactive, has empathy, is very switched on. So pleased to hear that you're impressed.
No, I am very impressed, because it's only when I actually invited her to this podcast and she said, I can't, I was in the UK last week, but I'm back to Portugal now. And then I was like, you're working in Portugal? That's crazy. Because I know this year in particular, not to name certain solicitors, but a few of them have made excuses about the stamp duty increasing and it's affecting their workload. But then I haven't seen any difference in performance from yourselves. You guys have thrived through that very awkward period where obviously buyers and sellers were trying to get their transactions done in a very short time frame. And I was just really impressed by the fact that she was doing it from elsewhere, and it was something that's really stood out for me. We've actually I worked out about 2.4 or just under 2.4 million worth of sales in the last 5 months. One question I wanted to ask, kind of in relation to what I just mentioned, is how have you been able to manage the workload? How I'm assuming I'm not the only agent you work with. How is it that you're able to kind of manage it all?
So fortunately, we've got a large enough team, and capacity is very important. And for me, we want to deliver a genuine personal service.
Yes. And
I always say that you're only as good as your last case. And what I mean by that is you could have 10 transactions go through. If the 11th one is slow or the client complains, it doesn't reflect well on us. It doesn't reflect well on me. So part of my job is ensuring that when we are instructed by a client, placing the client with someone in the team who has capacity.
Yes.
And provided we continue to do that, service levels will continue to be at the level that we want them to be. Transactions will go through smoother, and of course business partners like yourself, Rhys, will be happy.
Yeah, 100%,
simple as that.
100% makes a lot of sense. Would you say that you guys are trendsetters for what's happening in the UK? Because if I'm honest, I struggle to find. I actually had my PA search for solicitors that are kind of equal to the service and the way you guys go above and beyond. Would you say that you guys are definitely miles apart from some of your competitors in terms of what you guys do?
I wouldn't say we're miles apart, but we genuinely care about our clients. It goes back to empathy. It's a buzzword that we've used a number of times. And sometimes it's just reminding yourself that when you get a file, when you get an email with a client's name, it's not just another file.
Yes.
It's understanding this is someone's life.
Yeah.
And this is something I drill into my team, understanding that every transaction is important to that client. That client may be a seller who has been in that property for 30 years, selling for the first time, a potentially daunting process. And conversely, they could be a first-time buyer who's saved up for the last 7 years to put that deposit into their property. They put their blood, sweat and tears into that deposit, and equally are daunted by a process that they're unfamiliar with and need that transaction to go through. So where we're different is that we genuinely have empathy, but we're also commercially driven. And I would say both of those aspects are equally important. When I say commercially driven, what I mean by that is we have targets, Rhys. We've got billing targets, we've got completion targets, and that is important for us. And it's important for our business partners to know, because we deal with, unfortunately, incompetent lawyers on the other side of transactions. And for us, we know that if we're dealing with a commercially minded lawyer on the other side, regardless of whether they're part of our team or not, if they're commercially minded, if they're switched on, the transaction's going to go through smoother and for the betterment of both of our clients. But again, going back to your question, we have the genuine empathy, we're commercially driven, and we look for solutions rather than problems.
Do you ever think the UK will adapt to the strategy and the time frame of how it's done in the States, USA, Canada, where it's a couple weeks, maybe even 3 weeks for someone to sell, agree to exchange of contracts? Do you think the UK will ever catch on to that? Because we always seem like we're 3-4 years behind on everything else that goes on, apart from obviously select solicitors like yourself. Do you think other solicitors might start to do things differently at some point, or do you think the UK might try to change things to make things easier for people?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it will match some of the time frames abroad, namely in the States, where for the most part you can have a realtor or an estate agent play a similar role to a lawyer. I think here there's definitely an appetite for the process to be streamlined. Whether that's through the reduction of forms that are introduced, whether that's some of the processes being more simplified. What was great about the last sort of 3-4 years is that during the COVID period, it allowed more lawyers to work remotely rather than come into the office, and that's changed the mindset of a number of lawyers throughout the industry, understanding that you don't have to be in your office to get your client's transaction through. So long as you have a laptop, a mobile, a Wi-Fi connection, you can work. So I think there are definitely ways that the transaction process can be reduced. It's something that for the most part is outside of our hands as lawyers. We're guided by a regulatory body, banks, and other third parties, but all we can do is continue to be commercially minded, be solutions driven, and that in itself will help reduce the time frames.
Definitely. Do you feel like your clients are just as empathetic as you are when you're doing the transactions? Because I mean, I'm sure you guys have got stories and stories of clients that expect the world when sometimes it's the property that's holding things up. Have you got like a case study or a scenario where a client expected a lot more than what you guys could deliver in the time frame?
It's a good question. I'll tell you, the most challenging clients I've ever had, Rhys, are fellow lawyers.
Oh, really?
Because they think that they know it all.
Right.
Simple as that. So without doubt, whenever I know that my client is a lawyer, I know that we have to strap ourselves in. We're going to be in for a ride, because they will naturally want to do more, even if they're not in property law themselves, and it becomes a bit of a struggle. But I would say, as a general rule, right at the very outset, I have a conversation with my client where I explain to them that I'm a specialist, that I'm experienced, I know I'm doing, and providing they put their trust in me, then we will work well together and we'll get the transaction through smoothly. More often than not, it's the lack of trust.
Right.
And I understand that it's building that rapport from the beginning. So they are trusting a stranger, Rhys, to handle. Again, we give the example of Mrs. Smith, who's had her property for the last 20 years, cannot remember the process, considers it daunting, has been introduced to a lawyer and expects to put her whole trust into that lawyer. It's difficult. And for us, it's having that conversation with the client, building that rapport as quickly as we can, and that tends to reduce some of the issues.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Do you prefer it to go quicker then?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The quicker the sale gets through, Rhys, the quicker we get paid. So
no, that's fair. That makes
we're commercially driven. So for us, if there is a quick time frame, it works well for us, providing it's realistic.
One of the main reasons I wanted to bring you down as with the first guest on the podcast, so we're calling it the Nitty Gritty Podcast for the meantime, is there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that buyers and sellers don't see, and I think it's really important that you've shared some insight into that, and it was really important that because we've been working quite closely together, you be the first person that's here to kind of tell your story and give some knowledge and let people know that it can be a lot smoother than what people make out. It's actually one of the most stressful processes, they say, to go through when buying and selling. And I think especially for the clients that we put in touch with yourself and that we've worked on together, they've had a really good experience with the service that you guys have provided, and you're getting really good testimonies and reviews from the same clients as well, which is really good to see. And but ideally what I'd like to do and start to transition into is making the UK public and everyone else aware that transactions don't have to take as long as what everyone thinks they do, and I'd like to create a service where people can move in within a month, within 2 months, so that they can plan things a lot better. Obviously it does depend on chains and other people involved, but ideally I'd like it to be pretty much a 4 to 12 week turnaround for every transaction, and I feel like you guys have definitely set a bar for where the levels are, because there's been other solicitors I've worked with in the past that have said they can deliver, they get a full capacity, and then all of a sudden they can't kind of handle the workload, and then they make excuses for things, whereas all the clients I've put in touch with yourself have had glowing reviews on the services that you guys have provided, and I'm really thankful for that. And I think you reached out to me at a perfect time, if I'm honest. I mean, you kind of was like a knight in shining armour. It got to a point where the solicitors I was working with couldn't take on the workload and the amount of sales I was putting through. You guys have come along, and you've saved the day. So really, really appreciate that.
No, thank you for those kind words. And as far as we're concerned, you've been a pleasure to work with. Similarly, commercially driven, dynamic, and helpful. And that's really what we want from a business partner, from any estate agent. Really understanding that if there's anything we need from you to help drive the process, that you're receptive, and you have been. So, we're absolutely delighted to.
One other question I've just whilst it's in my mind, why do you think it's taken so long for this kind of collaboration to be advertised? I'm not saying that estate agents don't get on with solicitors. There's obviously lovely collaborations that are going on throughout the whole of the UK, but for something like this, which is really simple, a very small podcast or a conversation, why do you think it's taken so long for this to be advertised, that solicitors and estate agents can get on?
It's a good question, because I've never really seen it before myself too. Again, I don't want to hark back to empathy and my background, but I feel it's understanding the roles and the importance of everyone's role in the process, whether you're an estate agent, a lawyer, the mortgage broker, the client. It's just taking a step back and understanding that we're dealing with an important transaction, someone's life, and respecting everyone in that process. Respecting the fact that the estate agent has has sold the property, and there are a number of steps even before that process. Understanding the lawyer's been instructed to perform a very important role as part of the process. Understand that the broker, again, similarly has packaged the deal for that buyer. And then you've got the two most important parties, the seller and the buyer, who have a common goal, but sometimes also want different things, and managing everyone's expectation. And really you're at the heart of that, Rhys, because you're dealing with everyone. You have a unique role because you're the only party in that process that can speak to everyone. So there's a lot of pressure with that, a lot of stress, but one that you seem to navigate very well. So well done.
Thank you. You know what, for me it's just about, like you said, managing the expectations from the offset. In fact, in an earlier episode I actually speak about how it's effectively like a therapy session that you go through about 3 months where you make sure the buyer understands, the seller's understanding. The communication is at the forefront of what I deliver, and it's why the reviews kind of reflect that as well. But I find it bizarre that this hasn't happened already. You know, social media plays a huge part of everyone's kind of day to day now, and you're seeing, you know, podcasts and everything now. But there hasn't been a collaboration like this where, you know, an estate agent works with a solicitor. Obviously we're going to do future ones where another member of my team, the mortgage broker, I'll also have him involved as well, because as you know they play a massive role in the transaction. But yeah, I just wondered why, you know, what your opinion was, and why social media or people hadn't gone to social media with this type of approach yet. It baffles me, to be honest with you. Do you think it's important to be present? Because obviously I noticed on your page you posted and you're active on social media. Do you think that is important for your business model?
I think it is important. I think advertising and the way you can advertise your services has evolved and changed over the years. And social media is a great tool. It's a great way to show the wider public what you're doing, the service that you can provide, obviously positive reviews from your clients, and to be able to develop professional relationships, whether it's with potential business partners or prospective clients. So it's a tool that, if you can use it well, can work to your advantage.
100%. Where can people find you or reach out to you if they've got need any advice or anything like that? Is there a preference? Is it email? Is it Instagram? Where do you prefer for people to message?
So there are a number of different ways. On Instagram, my handle is OnePropertyLawyer. You can always drop me an email at william.michael@taylor-rose.co.uk. Whether you want some advice, whether you're potentially looking at instructing us, whether it's property or not, we can help.
Perfect, no worries. Well, we're going to end it there. It's been brilliant to get some insight from William and, you know, the team at Taylor Rose. I said they're phenomenal. They're my main team. If you guys are interested in a bespoke and tailored service to your needs, contact myself for your sale needs, or William for the conveyancing side, just for a little bit of advice, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, so my model is a bit of a unique one. So I'm self-employed. So my team trade as Taylor Rose, but they're employed by my company.
Right.
So I get to do things my way. Right. Almost like a franchise, if you like.
But how did you get your team to care the same way you?
Because if you want to join my team, you have to have the right attitude. It's as simple as that. So I don't care whether you're the cleaner or a partner. If you don't have the right attitude, you're not joining my team. Simple as that. Because as I said, it's the one thing I can't teach. I can develop your experience, develop your skill set, but if you've got the wrong attitude, I just, that's one thing in life you can't teach.
No.